Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our sixth Learn From Home Live. My name is Rose, and I am the Marketing and PR Coordinator here at Ocean Sonics. And I'm joined today by Donald Killern, the Executive Director of Eastern Charlotte Waterways. Hi, Donald.
Hey, Rose. How you doing?
I am lovely, thanks. I'm enjoying the beautiful summer weather. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's foggy as hell over here.
Well, I won't brag about the sunshine for much longer. So for those of you who joined us for our previous sessions, you'll know that we regularly hold staff learning sessions at our office. And this is where our teammates share their expertise with the rest of our crew. And now, because so many of us, not just Ocean Sonics, are working from home, we wanted to share our learning sessions with you. So we are going to be doing these live sessions regularly, so keep your eyes on our social media channels, and we're going to share all the details such as upcoming topics and sessions on our social feeds. So if you missed our previous sessions, don't worry, you can find all of them online. We do record all of our live sessions and they live on our YouTube channel, so you can visit them anytime you'd like. Today's session is also going to be recorded and shared online, so don't worry if you missed something or if you want to watch it again. So for everyone joining us today that's a little unfamiliar with Ocean Sonics, we're an ocean acoustics company and we're based in Truro, Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada. And we created the IC Listen, and this is a real-time smart hydrophone. It's a tool that's used to collect ocean sound data, and what makes it special is that this hydrophone processes that data in real time so you can actively listen while the sensor is deployed. So today's session is all about acoustic monitoring programs and how a multi-stakeholder ecosystem management system operates in one of the world's most charismatic marine environments, the Bay of Fundy. And even though it is super foggy where Donald is and beautifully sunny where I am, we actually both live on the Bay of Fundy.
Yeah.
So it's wild how different it can be on one side versus the other. And for me personally today, I am on the sunnier side of that coin. So Donald will be leading today's session. And he and his team at Eastern Charlotte Waterways have been recording soundscapes of the Outer Bay of Fundy since 2015. They've expanded their monitoring program to include recordings from multiple sites throughout the bay in order to create a complete acoustic soundscape of the area. So this is collecting data on vessel traffic and marine mammals. So thank you so much for joining us today, Donald.
My pleasure, Rose. I'm so grateful to be here. I've had a wonderful relationship with Ocean Sonics since we began working on underwater noise in the Bay of Fundy. And I think that not only are you a great company, incredibly innovative, I think that you're really one of the best upstart Canadian companies. You're involved in ocean technology long before it was, for those that don't know, ocean tech has become very popular as an economic growth strategy in Atlantic Canada. But long before that, Ocean Sonics was finding a way to get it done. And you've been wonderful partners, and I feel very grateful to be here.
Well, we're all here for the whales, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got it.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Eastern Charlotte Waterways for everyone who's unfamiliar, and a little bit about your acoustic program?
Sure, absolutely. Eastern Charlotte Waterways it's a grassroots environmental organization, historically working on freshwater in southwestern New Brunswick. That's really where the organization began. It was volunteer-led when it started in 1993. And I arrived 8 years ago in 2012, and with an interest in marine science, and came here because I saw that there was a good foundation of freshwater science, which is where I was weak. And so I thought, and a very charismatic marine environment, the Bay of Fundy. So I thought there would be an opportunity to do some development around ideas that I was interested in. And one of those was certainly underwater noise. I had studied underwater noise a little bit in my graduate work and was interested in applying that knowledge to a real marine environment. And so over time, I developed the project. It's really the first project I developed without funding. And then eventually a suitable funder came along and we had the project ready to go. That's where I met Ocean Sonics. You were highly recommended by our academic partner, Dr. Jack Terhune at UNB St. John, University of New Brunswick, St. John. And so that's where the acoustic program was born. It was in 2013, 2014. The Energy East pipeline was very much a consideration. The TransCanada was actively pursuing environmental impact assessments. A big part of that was underwater noise. it was impossible to get a straight answer about how much noise was actually in the Outer Bay of Fundy. And so that was the moment where I had an opportunity to take our project and turn it into reality. We wanted to serve as our role as the grassroots environmental organization to develop an accurate measurement of underwater noise in the Outer Bay of Fundy, so that the people that lived here could understand the implications of the proposed development.
Yeah, and what an area to actually create an acoustic soundscape of. I mean, it's famous for its tides, but the Bay of Fundy just has such a wealth of marine life, and with the increase in, of course, cruise and cargo, it's hard to imagine just exactly what goes on below the surface there.
The amount of energy. And that's why we get this, I'm in the fog, the Fundy fog. So I've worked at a couple different places. I started in tropical marine environments, so coral reefs and mangroves, which are spectacular and colorful, and everything that you've heard about them is true. But the Bay of Fundy is, the intertidal king. And I didn't really learn that until I got here. But of course, biggest tides means biggest intertidal. And so there's two pieces to it. The power is real, and when you live next to it, you feel the rhythm of the tide, and you are impacted by the power. It's that powerful that you get headaches if the weather's changing a certain way. It really is 20 atomic bombs every day, or hundreds of atomic bombs just going off around you, which is crazy. And so this time of year, I'm on traditional Pesca de Magadi or Passamaquoddy territory, and so this is known as Gaspereau moon. That's they tell time through the year. Their calendar is based on the moon, and so this time of year, when the Gaspereau or the alewife or the herring or whatever you want to call them, when they're running, you get that. We get porpoise and seal like right up to the shores. The fish are here, and it's all happening, and of course, the whales are starting to arrive and will slowly sort of fill the bay over the next few months.
Well, fantastic. Why don't we hop right into your presentation?
Sure.
We are going to have a Q&A session afterwards. So if anybody wants to leave a question on our social channels for Donald, if you want to know something more about Eastern Charlotte Waterways, or if you have a question based on something that he presents today, just leave us a comment. I will be monitoring our feeds, so we'll be able to get to that and answer you live after the presentation. So Donald's going to share his screen, and we'll get right into it.
All right, let's take it away. My presentation today. So my hope is to. Rose, do you have to approve this? My share.
Yeah, I'll just put it.
I'm
right
sorry.
in. Okay.
Here we go. Okay, so thanks again for having me. My presentation today, I'm trying to take a broader approach, and I love our underwater noise work. I'm passionate about it. It's certainly, I'm not I don't have a PhD in it. I'm not, I don't do physics. I don't do, intense underwater noise work. What I try to do is build environmental management programs that work with multiple stakeholders that ultimately deal with the improvement of our environments and ultimately for the goal of improving the life of all the living things that depend on them. So it's ambitious, but my goal today is to present our underwater noise program in the full, within the full spectrum of the work that we do and how I see it and why I think it's important. So first want to give a few acknowledgements. We are talking about multiple stakeholders. I won't drill into the stakeholders as I move through it too much, but obviously Port St. John is the third largest port in Canada by tonnage. It's home to Canada's largest oil and gas refinery. It's a key piece of national infrastructure, and they've been wonderful partners for me as someone who doesn't have necessarily I'm not coming from academia. I really am coming from the grassroots, asking for participation. Ocean Sonics, as I've mentioned, has been an incredible partner, supporting us, even though we're just a small client in what's increasingly a very large business. And then UNB SJ, Dr. Jack Terhune, and all the staff there have been very supportive. And and have given freely and generously of their time, again, to empower grassroots management of the natural environment in the Outer Bay of Fundy. And I'm very grateful. The funders aren't on there, but Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the provincial government, even down to fishermen who give us rides. I mean, it's in order to do this work, it requires a whole community, and it gets done, and it gets done properly, and then that data belongs to the community, and everyone can feel like the environment's being managed, not just from the top down. So we don't just have the federal government coming in making rules about how things should go, but the community actually plays a role in managing the marine environment here in a very significant way, in a way that requires a tremendous amount of capacity. So that's what we do. We did talk a little bit about our organization. We have been around since '93. We are a charity. We do have some pretty impressive laboratory operations here, and then a suite of environmental projects that include ecology, where the Noise Project lives, climate. Check out our new website, swnbclimate.ca, really cool climate change hub. And then historically and currently, we still do a lot of really good work around water, freshwater, and estuarine environments. So lots going on around here. It's all about the Bay of Fundy here. It's all about the watersheds that feed the bay. It's about the complex, and if you're joining us from somewhere else in the world, it's you've probably heard about the Bay of Fundy, but it really is as impressive as the name suggests. If you were just to arrive on a cruise ship for a few hours, you may not get the full experience of the power, but we do have an incredible amount of water coming in and out. We have an incredible amount of fresh water draining into it. We have an interplay of currents and tides that result in nutrients coming up into the water column and driving productivity really from the ground up. And we end up with an incredible spectrum of living things that call the Bay of Fundy home, because of the way that the tides and currents and the land and the water interplay. It's it truly is a remarkable environment. Where I live, the tides can be upwards of 6 to 7 meters in difference, and where Rose lives, that can get up to 10, 11, 12 meters, and literally the highest tides in the world. So very impressive, incredible place to call home, incredible place to work, and really a place that is under a tremendous amount of pressure. I don't want to dwell on the negative a great deal, but the Bay of Fundy and the Gulf of Maine are under a tremendous amount of stress as a result of anthropogenic carbon, and more so than kind of your average ecosystem. A temperature change is sort of the key one that really separates us from other aquatic environments. We have a unique, or not unique, but we have a very intense interplay between cold water coming down from Greenland and the Labrador Current and the Gulf Stream passing us by from the tropics and the Caribbean. And the interplay between those currents is changing. And that's resulting in a very dramatic change in temperature, well beyond what we'd expect just from the greenhouse effect. The carbon and greenhouse gases trapped in the atmosphere are melting the ice caps, and that's causing the density of the waters to change and resulting in a dramatic change in how the temperature of our water impacts our living things. A lot more precipitation as a result of climate change. We have a huge watershed in the Gulf of Maine, and so that means a lot more. Those rivers are draining these massive precipitation events, and that's resulting in a decrease in phytoplankton, and phytoplankton is the base of the food chain. So our phytoplankton and zooplankton populations are what drive this, the incredible life that lives here, the floorboards of that, if you have a North Atlantic right whale or a humpback whale or a fin whale, those animals are representative of a level of productivity, an incredible level of productivity. And that productivity begins with the transfer of energy from light into the food web, and that happens with phytoplankton. And we've had a real problem with that in the Bay of Fundy, and then the acid thing. And ocean acidification is difficult, perhaps for folks without a scientific background to understand, but much the same way that the carbon we produce through transportation and energy causes problems in the atmosphere. Over 30% of that carbon dioxide actually ends up in the ocean, and that through some basic chemistry results in a rapid change in the pH. And when I learned about pH in grade school, one of the examples the teacher gave always was that this is the pH of the ocean, and it'll never change. It would be so even up to the 80s, 90s, we still thought that the environment it'd be very difficult for us to change the environment. But now we see pH changing increasingly, and that's really, really dangerous. And for people that study it, I'm sure that they share my anxiety around the rapidly changing pH. So an ecosystem is made up of all these different factors. An ecosystem is a series of niches. Each niche has its own temperature, pH, these key statistics that the life gets tailored to. And so the danger in rapid change in temperature and pH is that the niche will quickly change. The life cannot evolve as quickly as we're changing the niches, and that's when we start to encounter dangerous levels of collapse. So a little bit of ecosystem stuff in the Bay of Fundy to get started, and now one of my favorite writers, Kurt Vonnegut, always said, put the ending at the start. And so we're talking about whales. Everything that we're doing, we're talking about whales because they're charismatic, and we identify with them, and we want to care for them. And when we see them struggling, it triggers something in us that causes us to be more mindful of our impact on the environment, even though all life is important to the system, but the whales really get the attention. So just a couple of whale shots here. Just this week, National Geographic touched in on the North Atlantic right whale, which is obviously struggling. A lot of our work is funded because of the struggles of the North Atlantic right whale. It's not a good news story, but we do have hopes that we can create an environment that the North Atlantic right whale can continue to exist in. National Geographic identified 3 main stressors that were causing harm to the North Atlantic right whale, which is the decrease in their preferred food, which is copepods. That's definitely a huge issue linked into some of that phytoplankton stuff I talked about. Same sort of idea. Of course, gear entanglement is a socioeconomic challenge. Our fishing industry is a key pillar, the main pillar of our economy. And here in the Bay of Fundy, we have a lot of experience, and our fishermen are very accomplished in existing side by side with the right whales. But because of the environmental change in the Bay of Fundy, we're seeing more right whale activity in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and Canada is not as prepared for that, and it's difficult for us to transition to protecting them in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So lots of challenges with entanglement. And then the third thing is underwater noise. And so again, a lot of our work is funded because of that. But again, we think of our noise program. We don't believe that you can save the North Atlantic right whale or improve. Really, what we want to improve the habitat of the North Atlantic right whale. And so my presentation today is about habitat management. Noise is just one thing, but if we cut down all the trees but make it quieter in the Bay of Fundy, it won't do much for the North Atlantic right whale. So I want to try and tie it all together in an ecosystem-based approach rather than just underwater noise as a marine management strategy. So North Atlantic right whale is obviously very important. I also wanted to throw old Tom up here. Not quite as dire of a story. We found old Tom, some of his upcalls in our data in 2016. It was flagged as a potential orca in the Bay of Fundy. I'd never heard of that before, but luckily the CBC helped corroborate that data. And sure enough, old Tom is a resident, sometimes resident of the Bay of Fundy, and we've got him there in our data. Now, this isn't, if you can hear this, that's not old Tom himself, but that is a humpback whale, which is, we get a lot of humpback songs in our data. So on this map, again, I want to link ocean noise into our larger ecosystem-based approach to environmental management in the Outer Bay of Fundy. The red stars on this slide represent our current monitoring sites for underwater noise. The yellow stars represent some of our past monitoring sites that we're not currently monitoring, but do have some really good data from. And then we've got some of the watersheds delineated, and so I want to think about underwater noise as a component of a management strategy for this whole area. So my job, my career, my passion is to try and design strategies that can push forward the idea that if I want to make North Atlantic right whales healthier, I have to deal with this whole piece of land. I can't just deal with a few noise monitoring sites, although that's an important part of a successful management strategy. And this is important. This is why we need grassroots management, because provinces and federal governments aren't necessarily concerned with the whole picture. They have specific parts that they're interested in. So inland here, we keep an eye on land use. We want to make sure that we're not getting too much clear cutting. That's sort of the first piece. We prescribe to this ridge to reef idea of environmental management. So we want to make sure the riparian zones of the rivers and the areas around the lakes have good forestation. We think and we believe in that's important to the health of the North Atlantic right whale, that it begins at the top of the ridge at the highest point in the watershed. And so we keep an eye on land use, and then we link land use to water quality. So we have an extensive historical water quality monitoring program in the rivers and lakes of our region. It's good work if you can get it. It's a great way to spend a day trying to make sure that your rivers and lakes are in good shape. It's a lot easier than monitoring for underwater noise, that's for sure. We spend a lot of time out on Passamaquoddy Bay and other estuaries. Again, it's if you pick the right day, you really can't beat it as a way to make a living. We've got lots of data around contaminants, what's coming down the rivers, how that gets dissipated into the estuary. Again, trying to manage environmental health from the top of the watershed down the rivers and into the estuary. Some of our estuarine work went so well in southwestern New Brunswick that we got to do it in the whole Bay of Fundy. Something about the Bay of Fundy, though, is that taking water samples, going out a couple times a year and taking some water samples, it's difficult. It's such a dynamic environment. The mixing is so intense. It's very difficult to build a vision of environmental health or an assessment of environmental health based on a limited environmental monitoring program. So, but you do see that we have data sites, or we have monitoring sites for estuarine health all the way from where I'm sitting to where Rose is sitting at the top of the Bay of Fundy. So trying to take, we're trying to, again, help manage. All these estuaries have their own watershed groups like Eastern Charlotte Waterways that are monitoring the fresh water like we do, but not all groups have the capacity to go out and then take that into the estuary. So we try and build a whole picture of environmental health, but again, very difficult with how dynamic it is. And so that really brings us into ocean noise. Ocean noise is it's a component of the physical environment. It's not chemical, it's physical. So and with the data loggers that Ocean Sonics have designed, it makes it possible for us to not only collect data in a way that's meaningful, but also make comments and suggest management strategies very quickly because it's really a point source. We can really look to the amount of activity, link it to the amount of noise, and start to really say something about how we can improve the environment. So environmental management is normally something that takes decades to implement strategies and fine-tune solutions and ultimately be able to say anything credible. But with noise, we can start to make improvements very quickly if we see issues. This graph here is something that I really hung my hat on early on. It helped me understand how noise impacts the environment. You can see the calls of the whales. You can see some of the activities that you'd find in the marine environment. This is a general graph for it's applicable across the whole world. A little bit about our program or why it's important. Again, shipping is increasing, noise is increasing, And for every 4.5 decibels that noise increases in the underwater environment, that halves the communication of baleen whales. So there's some thought that prior to the Industrial Revolution, that whales could talk to each other almost across the whole world. A whale could say something to another whale, but that is less and less true as shipping becomes noisier and noisier. So get into our specific noise monitoring program now. Again, we're currently really monitoring 3 locations in the harbor, off Grand Manan, and then a site off Dipper Harbor or Point Lepreau. Really trying to just build a picture of what shipping looks like as it moves in and out of the Bay of Fundy to help us then develop management strategies. So there's where the hydrophones have been for the last few years. This is what our gear looked like when we first got started. So this is version 1.0. This is a modified crab pot, really grassroots stuff. I have a great team who helps design solutions to really difficult situations that I get them into. So this was a solution that was affordable and was something that we used gear that we had, and we really couldn't afford. We could just barely afford to buy the gear. And then we had to come up with a way to actually deploy it and get it back. And that soon once we showed that we were serious and that we knew what we were doing. Well, not that we knew what we were doing, but at least that we were serious. I'm not sure that some people, I don't know who's to say if we know what we're doing or not. Anyway, we got a little bit more dough regardless. So the proof's in the pudding. And we got our gear evolved, and this is a drawing that Rose and the Ocean Sonics team did for us and helped us bring into life. And so now this is what the gear looks like as it heads out to sea, as it gets ready to be thrown off the side of a local fishing boat. That picture is heading out to Dipper Harbor. So come a long way in a short period of time, and now we feel like we've got the capability. Probably increased our capability from being able to monitor in up to 40 meters of water, 40, and now I'd say we can monitor in up to 200 meters of water. So definitely made it our work a lot more impactful. Okay, so we record 5 of every 20 minutes. Those come in as WAV files. We break those down then into basically CSV files, and that's where the data analysis takes over. So our field work is very intense. The ocean is the bay is a very difficult place to do work in, and once we get that raw data in the waveform files back to the office, it doesn't get much easier. The level of knowledge around Python and MATLAB and some of the other and then the specific softwares like Noise Lab Pro and PamGuard, and Ocean Sonics has some proprietary software that's very useful as well. There's a tremendous amount of specialization that's required to actually do the analysis. So between the data collection and the data analysis, it's a different skill set, and it's each very challenging. Data management's not real simple either. I mean, we're producing terabytes of data each year, and happen, where my office is not filled to the gills, but I'm looking at right now. I can see I'm looking at 30 terabytes of noise storage right now. Luckily, it doesn't take up as much space as it used to. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do this back in the day. I know that it was a lot more difficult. But anyway, so we collect a bunch of data. We analyze it, and then we can start to actually figure out what we're looking at. So we can compare across sites. We do our analysis. Our main analyses all take place in 4 third octave bands. So basically 4 groups of frequencies, 20 hertz, 63 hertz, 125, and 1,000. And we choose those because baleen whales are communicating in the 20 hertz band. 63 and 125 are the major industrial shipping. Those are where the major industrial shipping happens. And then 1,000 hertz is more where we'd expect to find smaller boats. So that's what we're looking for. We can compare across sites. 100 decibels is really we're looking for things that pop up above 100 decibels. We can take individual sites. This is an average day in the St. John Harbor. Those spikes, those are when the Digby ferry. So each day a ferry goes back and forth to Digby, and over a season, that comes out in the data here and what an average day looks like in the St. John Harbor. We can see over a longer period, we can see how noise changes through the seasons in an average year in our key frequencies. And then we can also graph this is the whole spectrum that we've collected. So in Passamaquoddy Bay, we see that hump in around 200, 250 hertz. That's something that we'd want to explore, something that we'd want to understand. Why is the noise, why is there more energy in that frequency band than there are in some of the others? And is there anything we can do to help manage that? So there's no laws around underwater noise in Canada. We use the European Union. They have a marine strategy that includes guidelines for underwater noise in the 63 and 125 bands. So again, they want to see those under 100 decibels. And in the absence of any Canadian regulations, we use that European guideline as a way to make comments about how things are going. This is a Wentz curve. It's a pretty complicated looking thing, but it basically helps me understand if noise is being produced by ships or if it's being produced by nature. So nature's quite noisy. Waves and wave action and spray and bubbles are very, very noisy. And so we got to separate that out from the industrial shipping. This is a summary of marine mammal detection in the Bay of Fundy. This work was done by Ocean Sonics for Eastern Charlotte Waterways, and we're grateful for their expertise. It shows us when we see different marine mammals in our data, and then on the bottom there you see the breakdown of what those calls actually look like in the audiograms. Very cool stuff. So the bottom piece is what the all marine mammal detection, the first pass is always done by algorithms. And these are the sorts of things that the algorithms are looking for. And once they pings a potential call, then we go into the data manually and ground truth it. This is what the St. John Harbor looks like to a noise manager. It's a heat map. It shows me months. It shows me third octave bands. And that helps me understand when the noise is being produced and at which frequencies it's being produced. So I can see how shipping is impacting the environment, as well as any anomalies that I might want to explore. In this graph, I can see the cruise ship season pretty clearly, but I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this area up here, we know that the cruise ships produce noise at around 400 hertz, and they tend to be here in the fall months. So this little discoloration up here, to me, I know that's the cruise ships, and that allows me then to explore ship-specific noise, which is very important. So that's how we. I'm going to move. I'm going to just take a break for a second, and so just to summarize, the noise program is part of a larger ecosystem-based monitoring or management program. Data collection is challenging. Data analysis is challenging, but we're still trying to drive towards a biological result. So we're trying to manage habitat we're trying to improve habitat for living things. And if you've been paying attention, you've seen that I haven't even come close to doing that yet in the presentation. So all we've got so far is some physical data. It's so far just a physics experiment, collecting information about the physical environment and trying to make sure that it's not itself problematic. So what I'm going to move into now is just a few slides about how we hope to link the physical data to the biological. And it starts with understanding each ship and how that ship produces noise as it moves in and out of the Bay of Fundy in the Bay of Fundy traffic separation scheme. That's the name of our shipping lane, the proper name. So I've got a couple different types of boats here, cruise ships, container ships. Start to see which frequencies they're putting out noise at, and also this is amplitude and weight, so we can see which are most efficient. We can start to see how they contribute to the soundscape. Again, which frequencies they're putting noise out at, and how much noise they're putting out at those frequencies. That helps us. So now we start to build a library of these measurements, and that's going to be very important. So we get a library of their source, and then this is what's called spreading loss. So again, the ships are moving around the environment, and we need to know how the energy dissipates. So how the noise decreases as it gets a certain distance away from a receiver. So eventually, if we know the ship, it's coming down the shipping lane, we'll know how much noise a receiver would measure at a certain distance for that ship. Now, today, the receiver is our hydrophones, but in the future, we hope the receiver will be a whale in motion so that we can ensure that we manage for whales in the shipping lane. So I need to know what ship is coming down the channel. I need to know how much noise that ship puts out. I need to know what the spreading loss values are for the Bay of Fundy. And then I need to know where the whales are. And that last piece, I'm not going to be able to say much about that last piece today, but the rest of it, we're getting pretty close. So we know we're learning about the spreading loss. This is a heat map for shipping. We know where the shipping is taking place. We know what the names of the ships are. We know what those ships put out. We know how the energy dissipates. And so we're getting very close. We now have these predictions of the soundscape. And so this is the last slide in the presentation. Unfortunately, I'm not capable yet of tracking whales in real time and making sure that ships are and the port is adjusting their activities in real time. But we're very, very close to that. We've come a long way. And now the next step will be to add that real-time whale location mixed with shipping schedules so that, if we know there's whale activity and we know that there's 3 boats coming into the St. John Harbor today, we can kind of just work with the port to have the ships lay back, come in one at a time, maybe try and avoid periods when the Digby Ferry is moving. Some pretty simple management strategies that we'll be able to support with real data. And it's been 5 years of hard work. We've made progress. We still have a lot of work left to do, and we really believe that we can get it done. That's it for me.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Donald. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you do have any questions for Donald about what he presented today, you can leave a comment or a question on any of our social channels. We are monitoring them right now, so we can answer them live if you have a question currently. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us after the fact, and I will do my best to answer you, or I'll connect you with Donald, who has superior expertise on the topic. In the meantime, we do have a couple of questions for Donald, so let's start right in with those. So you mentioned the beginning of your acoustics program. It kind of came from you, but can you tell me what really inspired you to start doing acoustic monitoring, and why did you think it was important?
Well, that's a great question. I did a master's degree in environmental practice, so I'm kind of a generalist, right? I'm jack of all trades, master of none, and but I love the ocean, and I grew up in Prince Edward Island, and so I was interested in modern management challenges for the marine environment. I was working in Belize at the time and trying to understand what those challenges would be. So, like any student, I was given an opportunity to research a topic, and underwater noise, that was where it began. And I wrote a paper, learned about it, and then never forgot. Some of the things around underwater noise are horrific, very horrific. The impacts on marine mammals can be horrific. I can't stress the horrificness enough. We're lucky that we don't have the type of the type of military activity in the Bay of Fundy that causes the more horrific impacts. But yeah, so it's the sort of stuff that really sticks with you if you have a passion for the marine environment. And that was it. I came to ECW, and was my job to develop environmental management projects. And the rest is history.
Well, and we are so glad to have you. So actually, that kind of ties right into a question we just received through Facebook from Emily. She wanted to know what effect sound has on whales. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Sure. We know more about its impact on whales than we do on some of the other living things. We're starting to learn more about the impacts on fish, but it's definitely very acute impact on whales, particularly. The whales are very communicative. They love to chat with each other. They share information, and they're very social. And so the impact on whales of underwater noise is almost identical to the impact of elevated noise on humans. I know that I don't want to go off on too big of a tangent, but one of the great pieces of whale noise research that's ever been done was here in the Bay of Fundy.
Sorry, I had sirens.
This is the office equivalent of having your cat walk in. After 9/11, they shut down everything, all the shipping, and what we saw in the Bay of Fundy, there was an active stress study happening in the Bay of Fundy. And so we had a baseline of stress in the whales. And during 9/11, we saw that the drop in noise directly related to a drop in stress hormones. And that's true. Like, nobody wants to live over by the train tracks. And so what we've done is we've taken a pristine environment and we basically built train tracks through it. So it's an environmental justice question. If you believe in whales, it's just like, we don't want to subject people to pollution. We don't want to subject the whales to pollution. So it limits their communication, but in general, it stresses them out.
Yeah, so we're kind of like really bad neighbors, always having a loud house party.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little more intense than that. It is a bit more like, hey, I used to live here. It was super nice. And then you came and built this railroad right in my backyard. That would be a thing. You can only imagine if we did that today, if we expropriated someone's land to build a railroad and then started sending trains through there at all hours of the night. You wouldn't be able to talk to your neighbors, and just generally you'd be sitting in your living room and the damn trains would come rolling through again, and it just wouldn't be a good time. And there's really, in terms of consciousness and there's just not that much difference between us and these beautiful animals that live around us. So it's just, that's the easiest way. It's just to think what it would be like if someone put a train track through your backyard. You wouldn't be particularly pleased with it.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly unpleasant.
Yeah, and it is, yeah, absolutely. And the data backs it up that's how it. And that work was done by Laurie Murison. And I knew that work. I used that work in the paper I wrote when I was still living in Belize. And so it was a pleasure to meet Laurie, and their work at the Grand Manan Whale and Seabird Institute is obviously legendary, and it's changed, it's informed so much. It's really impactful, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit for the work that they've done.
If anybody wants to read a little bit more about that, we will provide some links to some of the different studies and websites that Donald's talking about. So don't worry about collecting notes. We will provide all those to you. So we have actually a question here from Ashley Noseworthy. And if you are familiar with Ashley, she actually runs Edgewise Environmental out of Newfoundland.
Cool.
So she does a lot of work with seismic surveying. So I see where her question's coming from.
Cool.
She wants to know if you are collecting data using only stationary acoustics, or if you're using towed acoustics, or is there any plan to use any kind of towed acoustics?
Oh man, does that mean does she have a glider that she's willing to lend me? Are we talking about gliders? Towed acoustics? Yeah, everything is fixed passive acoustic monitoring. So it's an IC listen. We're just getting into array deployments now so that we can provide ISO compliant ship signature values. That's a lot of jargon, but yeah, the answer is fixed location monitoring. Unfortunately, I've gone from crab pod to acoustic release, and the next thing is definitely one of those autonomous gliders. So if Chris Taggart or Hansen at Dalhousie's watching this, you better watch your back, guys. I'm coming for your gliders. Those are expensive, though, I think. Do you guys make a glider, Rose?
You know what? Not yet, but I mean, sky's the limit as far as ocean tech. It's, it's
Totally.
the coolest thing on the map these days. So
Totally. So for those that don't know, we're now sort of the state of the art is affixing hydrophones to an autonomous glider, which then can sort of charge itself with solar energy and control itself out in the water, and can be at sea for a tremendous amount of time, picking up acoustic monitoring. Fixed monitoring serves our purpose pretty well, dealing with industrial shipping and a pretty intense port activity. That's it's doing the trick, I think, for now.
yeah, well, I'll make sure to connect you with Ashley so you guys can chat a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more about what they're up to.
Fantastic. So we have another question here, and this one's a little bit trickier. It comes from Eric Rem. So how important are coincident TS measurements on estimating soundscape SPL uncertainty?
Holy smokes.
Let's say I might have to call in Jillian to help out a little bit.
I wish I had the question in front of me. I don't understand the acronym. TL?
TS. So we have SPL, so the sound pressure limit. But we'll refer to Jillian and Eric. We'll get back to you because
Give it to me again. Give me a shot at it, Rose, at least. I mean, I only got it once. I didn't even get a chance to write it down. I can't see it on the screen. I mean, I'm not going to be able to answer it, but I might be able to answer it.
So
read it to me one more time.
How important are coincident TS measurements on estimating soundscape SPL uncertainty?
I think that I would say to Eric, if I had to answer it, that we record so much data that we do try and, okay, I'll do my best. We try and eliminate coincidence by looking at some of the more extreme results. So, for example, like if a sea creature is walking on the hydrophone, we sort of take the top percentages, the loudest, and kind of we're skeptical of those, and we try and remove those. So we do try and clean up the data a little bit, and then we collect so much data. We have so many samples that our error bars end up being really tight. So I know all that to be true, and I apologize if I didn't fully understand the question.
So we do have a clarification from Eric. He was mentioning temperature and salinity, but I'm unfamiliar if you have any like CTDs or additional sensors that would actually determine that for you.
Yeah, we don't. We only monitor. Okay, so that will help me with the question. So temperature and salinity. Give me the question again, Rose. How important are temperature and salinity?
Yeah, coincident temperature salinity measurements on estimating soundscape SPL uncertainty.
Oh, geez, that's a great question. Oh, God, I couldn't tell you right now. I know that we're currently using some open source MATLAB models to try and bring all that data together so that we can have accurate, it very well may have a pretty significant impact on spreading loss and how the noise dissipates as it moves through the environment. But I don't have an answer. And we don't collect any additional data at the site, but we certainly have access to nearby smart buoys that are collecting a tremendous amount of data. We've always been advised by Ocean Sonics and by our academic partner to keep our deployments strictly noise related, because the other gear would generate a signal that we'd have to then go out and scrub. But we're always thinking critically about that, and we do incur a lot of expense and go to a lot of trouble to get the gear under the water, and having a more robust and diverse data set that is a bunch of environmental parameters like that would be interesting.
So I suppose that ties into another question that I had for you. Did you want to collect any additional data around these sites? Do you have any plans to add any additional sensors like a CTD?
That's a great question. Again, it just kind of touched on it there. We are now going to the middle of the Bay of Fundy on a pretty regular basis and spending a lot of money to do so, to deploy and retrieve gear that can be down to 200 meters. And we really should be more critical. We should be thinking more critically about the gear that we're sending down so that we can get more return on the investment from actually getting to the monitoring sites. On the flip side of that, I will say that, we are growing in capacity each year, and it's just been in the last 12 months that we've really shifted into a new gear, and we onboarded some new staff and built a lot of capacity over the last 12 months. And so I am open to the idea. And if I tie it back to my sort of thesis of the presentation, that I want to be managing the marine environment's the hardest part of a full aquatic complex ecosystem management program. Freshwater and lakes, estuaries even are simpler, but I do need a really robust collection of really robust data sets to really bolt on the marine environment in a meaningful way. So yeah, I take some CTDs, some ADCPs. Like, money's a huge consideration also. I mean, like,
ocean tech may be fun, but it's not cheap.
It's not cheap, and there's supposed to be, Halifax is supposed to be full of people building it, but who's testing it? And come on now, let's get it out in the Bay of Fundy, see if it really works.
Oh, well, it's the Bay of Fundy. If you want to know if something works, there's
That's
more.
the place to put it, right? That's what we learned from the Force site. For better or worse, if anyone can generate electricity in a meaningful way in the Bay of Fundy, they'll be able to do it anywhere. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
Climbing Kilimanjaro on your first hike.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do have a couple of questions related to the ongoing COVID circumstances. Since everything is a little bit quieter right now and traffic, especially from cruise ships, has been significantly reduced, do you think that this year is going to offer more insight into your understanding of the traffic in and out of the Bay of Fundy?
More insight, yeah, probably, Rose. I'd say so. At this point, the big ships, we know we have a pretty good handle on concentration and like the density of those ships and how they're moving around. I think it'll be similar to greenhouse gas emissions. We will get a better handle on what I think the general population will get a better handle on how meaningful particular types of reductions are. So, there's boats leaving St. John Harbor every day throughout COVID, carrying materials. Our supply chains were one of the good news stories of the COVID crisis, is that we have these incredible supply chains that have held up to a global pandemic for the most part. And so ships were moving around. We'll see a lot less cruise ships in the St. John Harbor this year. We will see an economic toll because of that. But much like greenhouse gases, I think what we'll learn is that maybe what we think of as the big issues are actually not that big. Maybe me driving my car back and forth to work isn't actually the problem. Maybe there's an extractive industrial regime that is just really, really hard on the environment. And a few of us sitting still, not a few of us, pardon me, but sitting still, not flying airplanes, it hasn't even really put a dent in just the tip of the iceberg. So we really do need full paradigm changes into, more of a holistic, elegant approach to how we manage our environments, and just kind of having a little less activity in the same type of extractive regime is not going to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. So I will end with one last question. What are your plans moving forward?
Oh, geez, so I know that
I've been following online, and I saw that you guys just deployed some more instruments for the summer season.
Yeah.
What are your plans moving forward for the rest of the year and maybe for next year? I know you mentioned installing an array.
Yeah. Well, our noise plans are to, we've really built some solid partnerships with some academics and also with the federal government. The federal government's more interested in our work now than they've ever been, and we're grateful for that. We hope and there's a staff at the federal government are really important contributors globally to how noise is measured and managed, thanks to some of the investments made in oceans protection by the federal government. So we do hope to get an array out this year. We hope to have a 3 hydrophone array, but in the whole spectrum, in the whole program, this year we're going to automate water quality monitoring. So I know that that's not what you're asking, but we're going to take our water quality data. We're going to stop sending people out to collect it. We're going to let data loggers do it the same way we do noise. We're going to try and make it so that data gets uploaded right into the cloud and gets analyzed and spit out as actual water quality scores. So we're automating the freshwater component of the program this year. We're excited about that. Noise, we're moving our monitoring sites directly into the middle of the shipping lane. So we are fully capitalizing on our 200-meter capability this year, which we're excited about. And that'll help us really nail down the shipping and the spreading loss. And then we've got to go looking for the whales and really start to merge those data sets. So it's a good question. I'm so focused on the day-to-day. I'm not always thinking about noise on the day-to-day, but I am bringing on another staff member to deal specifically with noise. We're actually building a virtual Bay of Fundy in MATLAB to basically building a virtual Bay of Fundy so that I can move ships and whales around in the virtual bay. Hypothetically, we'll have real shipping data. We'll put that into the virtual bay. That'll have all the temperature, the salinity, the depth, the substrate. It'll be fully virtual so that we can have we can have a virtual noise lab so we can start to build those cumulative impact assessments and start to make real management suggestions. So
lots going on for 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. There is lots going on. I wish I could take another crack at that question, but that's the way it goes. So yeah, lots going on. We have to build this virtual bay. We have to keep working on nailing down spreading loss at a very small scale and start to figure out how we're going to figure out where the whales are when they're in the bay.
Well, fantastic. As far as I can see, that's all the questions that we have for now. There was somebody who mentioned that they were really interested in reviewing your plot of noise distributions across the frequency spectrum. So sure. What I'll do is I will connect you separately with Jeff. And if anybody has any other questions, of course, you can always leave them on our social feeds. Again, thank you so much, Donald, for joining us. And if there was a question you didn't get to ask Donald, leave it on any of the social feeds, send us a message, or contact me directly using the Ocean Sonics contact form on our website. So you can always revisit this presentation on our YouTube channel. And if you want to know more about Donald and Eastern Charlotte Waterways and their programming, what they do, you can always find them on their website. It's ecw.ngo. And of course, they're active on all their social media channels as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next week for another session on ocean acoustics. Yeah.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.